The morning sky over New Jeju burned orange when the alien ship fell from the stars. Dr. Minji Kim was checking her research equipment when the ground shook beneath her feet. She looked up to see a silver streak cutting through the dawn clouds, trailing smoke and fire. The ship crashed into the forest 3 miles from her research station. Trees snapped like twigs. The impact sent birds screaming into the sky. Minji grabbed her emergency kit and ran toward the crash site, her heart pounding. She was a xenobiologist, trained to study alien life forms. For 5 years she had worked, alone on this frontier world, cataloging plants and small creatures. She had never seen anything like this ship before. Humanity had been exploring space for decades, but they had never found intelligent alien life. The ship was huge, made of some kind of dark metal that seemed to drink in the sunlight. Strange symbols covered its hull. Steam rose from cracks in its surface. Minji approached carefully, her scanner beeping warnings about radiation and unknown energy signatures. A hole had been torn in the ship's side. Through the gap she could see movement. Something large stirred in the shadows. Minji stepped closer, curiosity overcoming fear. A massive shape emerged from the wreckage. The alien stood nearly 10 feet tall, covered in thick armored scales that gleamed like polished stone. Its eyes were golden, intelligent and filled with pain. Blood seeped from wounds across its body. One arm hung useless at its side. The creature saw Minji and made a sound like distant thunder. It raised its good arm, and she saw claws as long as her fingers. For a moment they stared at each other across the smoking debris. The alien's mouth opened, revealing rows of sharp teeth, but the sound that came out was not a roar. It was almost like speech, deep and musical. Minji took a step back. Her hands shook as she reached for her communication device. She needed to call for help, but she was not sure if she should call for medical aid or military support. The decision was made for her. The sound of approaching aircraft filled the air. 3 military shuttles appeared over the trees, moving fast and low. They landed in a circle around the crash site, kicking up dust and debris. Soldiers poured out of the shuttles. "Weapons ready!" Captain Donghyun Park led them, his face grim behind his helmet visor. Minji knew him from the colony's monthly briefings. He was a good man, but he was also a soldier. "Dr. Kim, get back!" Park shouted over the noise of the engines. "We'll handle this." The alien turned toward the soldiers. Its golden eyes widened with what looked like fear. It backed toward its ship, making more of those thunderous sounds. The words were alien, but the meaning was clear. It was trying to communicate. "Wait," Minji called out. "I think it's trying to talk to us." Park raised his hand, signaling his men to hold their positions. He stepped forward slowly, his weapon lowered but ready. "Can you understand us?" he asked the alien. The creature tilted its massive head. It pointed to its ship and made more sounds. Then it did something unexpected. It placed its hand over its heart and bowed its head. "It's hurt," Minji said. "Look at those wounds. It needs medical help." But something was wrong. The alien's posture changed. Its eyes grew wild and unfocused. It staggered, and Minji realized it was losing too much blood. Pain and fear were making it confused. The alien suddenly roared and charged toward the soldiers. Perhaps it thought they were enemies from some ancient war. Perhaps it was simply dying and afraid. Park had no choice. He gave the order to fire. Energy blasts lit up the forest. The alien stumbled but kept coming. Its claws raked across a soldier's armor before more shots found their mark. The great beast fell to its knees, then forward onto the torn earth. Silence settled over the crash site. Smoke drifted between the trees. The alien lay still, its golden eyes now dark and empty. "Secure the area," Park ordered quietly. "Check for more survivors." Minji felt sick. She knelt beside the fallen creature, seeing intelligence in its features even in death. This had been a thinking being, not a mindless monster. Whatever had brought it to their world, it had died afraid and alone. "Captain," one of the soldiers called from inside the ship. "You need to see this." Park and Minji followed the soldier through the gap in the hull. The ship's interior was dark and strange, filled with technology they could not understand. But in a chamber near the back, they found something that changed everything. 3 small forms huddled together in what looked like a protective pod. They were like smaller versions of the adult alien, but their scales were softer, more colorful. The largest was about the size of a human child. The smallest could have fit in Minji's arms. The young aliens were clearly terrified. They pressed against each other, making soft, frightened sounds. When they saw the humans, they tried to hide deeper in their pod. "Cubs," Minji whispered. "They're children." The largest of the 3 stepped protectively in front of the others. Despite its fear, it spread its small arms wide, trying to shield its companions. The gesture was unmistakably brave, unmistakably familiar. Minji had seen human children do the same thing. "What do we do with them?" Park asked quietly. Minji looked at the orphaned cubs, then back at the body of their parent, lying in the forest. The adult had died trying to protect them, just as any human parent would. Now they were alone on a strange world, surrounded by the beings who had killed their guardian. "We take care of them," she said firmly. Park frowned. "Doctor, these are alien life forms. We don't know anything about them. They could be dangerous." "Look at them," Minji said. "They're babies. They're scared and alone, and they just lost their parent. Whatever else they are, they're innocent." The smallest cub made a sound like a whimper. It reached toward Minji with tiny clawed hands. In that moment, something changed in her heart. She saw past the scales and claws to the frightened child beneath. "I'm taking them back to my lab," she decided. "They need care, not cages." Park started to protest, but Minji was already moving toward the cubs. She spoke softly, gently, the way she would to any frightened animal. Slowly, carefully, she reached out her hand. The cubs watched her with large, intelligent eyes. The future hung in the balance, waiting for their choice. 3 days had passed since the crash. Minji's research laboratory had become something she never expected, a nursery for alien children. She had convinced Captain Park to give her 72 hours to prove the cubs were not dangerous. Now, time was running out. The cubs huddled in the corner of her main lab, surrounded by the makeshift bed Minji had built from research materials. They had not eaten anything she offered. They barely slept. The largest one, which Minji had started, calling Thais, watched her every move with suspicious golden eyes. Lieutenant Hyesu Choi knocked on the lab door. She entered carrying a tray of different foods, fruits, vegetables, even some meat from the colony's protein printers. Hyesu had been visiting every day, helping Minji however she could. "Any luck?" Hyesu asked, setting down the tray. Minji shook her head. "They won't trust me enough to eat. I'm worried they'll starve before they let me help them." Hyesu studied the cubs with sad eyes. She understood loss. Her own children had died in an alien attack on Titan Colony 3 years ago. That tragedy had made her hard and angry for a long time. But seeing these orphaned cubs brought back memories of her maternal instincts. "Have you tried showing them that the food is safe?" Hyesu suggested. "Maybe if they see you eat it first?" Minji picked up a piece of fruit and took a bite. She made exaggerated chewing motions, then smiled and patted her stomach. The cubs watched intently. The middle one, which she called Vera, tilted its head with curiosity. "Look," Hyesu whispered. "That one is interested." Vera crept forward slightly, its nose twitching. Minji placed a piece of fruit on the floor between them and backed away. After a long moment, Vera darted forward, grabbed the fruit, and retreated. To its siblings. It sniffed the food carefully before taking a tiny bite. The taste must have been good because Vera's eyes widened. It chittered softly to the others and took another bite. Soon all 3 cubs were eating, though they remained, wary and ready to flee. "Progress," Minji said with relief. Over the next few hours, the cubs became slightly more adventurous. Keth, the smallest, seemed particularly curious about Minji's equipment. When she sat down to update her research notes, Keth crept closer to watch her work. Minji noticed that the cubs made different sounds when they felt different emotions. Happy sounds were higher pitched and musical. Worried sounds were deeper and more rumbling. When they were scared, they made almost no noise at all. She started making notes about their behavior. The cubs were clearly intelligent. They worked together to solve simple problems like how to reach food placed on high shelves. They comforted each other when frightened. Most importantly, they seemed capable of learning. Captain Park arrived that evening with Dr. Jun-Ho Lim, a linguistics expert from the Colonial University. Park looked tired and stressed. "The authorities on Earth are asking questions," Park said, without introduction. "They want to know why we haven't sent the aliens to a proper research facility." Dr. Lim knelt down near the cubs, studying them with professional interest. "Fascinating," he murmured. "Look at how they position themselves. Classic protective formation, the oldest in front, youngest in back." This growled low in its throat when Dr. Lim got too close. The sound made everyone freeze. "It's protecting the others," Minji explained. "This won't let anyone near the younger cubs." "This?" Park asked. "I had to call them something," Minji said defensively. "Thais is the oldest and the leader. Vera is the curious one. Keth is the baby." Dr. Lim pulled out a sound recorder. "Dr. Kim, have you noticed any patterns in their vocalizations?" "Yes," Minji said excitedly. "They use different tones for different meanings. And watch this." She moved to her computer and played a recording of the cubs' happy sounds. All three cubs immediately perked up and looked around. "They recognize their own voices," Dr. Lim said with amazement. "This suggests significant cognitive development. They understand cause and effect." Thais made a series of complex sounds looking directly at the humans. The vocalization had structure, rhythm, almost like language. "It's trying to communicate." Dr. Lim breathed. "This is incredible." Park was less impressed. "Doctor, I need to know if they're safe. Earth Command is sending a specialist team to collect them tomorrow. I can't delay any longer." "They're children," Minji said firmly. "Scared, orphaned children. What's going to happen to them in some government lab?" "They'll be studied," Park said. "We need to understand their species, their technology, their intentions." "Their intentions?" Minji laughed bitterly. "They're babies. Their only intention is to survive." Hyesu stepped forward. "Captain, what if Dr. Kim is right? What if they're not a threat? Then why was their parent armed?" Park demanded. "Why did it attack us?" "Because it was hurt and afraid," Minji said. "Just like they are now." As if responding to her words, Keth made a soft, sad sound. The little cub had been listening to their conversation, and somehow it seemed to understand the tension in the room. It looked up at Minji with large, trusting eyes. Something melted in Minji's heart. She had devoted her life to studying alien life, but this was different. This was personal. These cubs were not specimens to be catalogued. They were individuals, with personalities, fears, and needs. "I won't let them be taken," she said quietly. Park sighed. "Dr. Kim, you're making this very difficult." "Good," Minji replied. "Some things should be difficult." Dr. Lim was still recording the cubs' sounds. "Captain, I need more time to study their communication patterns. If they can learn our language, if we can learn theirs, think about what that could mean for future contact with their species." "You have until tomorrow morning," Park said finally. "Then the decision is out of my hands." After the men left, Hyesu stayed behind. She sat down near the cubs, moving slowly and keeping her hands visible. To everyone's surprise, Vera approached her. The young alien sniffed at Hyesu's uniform, then gently touched the lieutenant's hand with one small claw. "Hello, little one," Hyesu whispered. Vera made a soft, questioning sound. "I think it knows we're trying to help," Hyesu said to Minji. "There's intelligence in their eyes, real understanding." Minji nodded. "They're learning to trust us. But if they're taken away, now all this progress will be lost. They'll be terrified all over again." As the night wore on, the cubs gradually relaxed. Keth even allowed Minji to check a small cut on its arm, applying antiseptic while This watched protectively. The oldest cub seemed to understand that Minji was helping, not hurting. When Minji finally settled down to sleep on a cot in the corner of the lab, she found Vera curled up on the floor nearby. The young alien had chosen to sleep closer to the humans than to its own siblings. It was a small gesture, but it meant everything. Trust was beginning to grow between two very different species. But time was running out. 3 months had passed since the crash. Minji's laboratory had been completely transformed into a comfortable home for the cubs. Soft bedding filled one corner, toys and puzzles covered tables, and the walls displayed pictures the cubs had drawn, with colorful paints. Dr. Junho Lim visited daily now, bringing new equipment to study the cubs' language. He had made an amazing discovery. The cubs could produce sounds that human ears could barely hear, very low-frequency vibrations that carried emotional meaning. "Watch this," Junho said to Minji. He played a recording of deep, rumbling sounds through his speakers. Immediately, all 3 cubs looked up from their breakfast with expressions of confusion and distress. "What was that?" Minji asked. "Grief sounds," Junho explained. "From recordings we made when we first found them. Those vibrations mean sadness, loss, missing someone who is gone." Thais approached the speaker and touched it gently with one claw. The young alien made questioning sounds, looking between Junho and the device. "It understands that the sounds came from the machine," Minji observed, "but it's confused because the emotions don't match anything in the room." Over the weeks, they had learned much about the cubs' communication. Happy sounds were light and musical. Angry sounds were sharp and quick. Fear was almost silent, just tiny whimpers that could barely be heard. But the most important discovery was that the cubs could learn. Thais had figured out that Minji was the human's name. When the cubs wanted her attention, they would make a specific sound that was their version of her name. It sounded like wind chimes mixed with birdsong. Vera had become fascinated with human technology. The curious cub would sit for hours watching Minji work at her computer, occasionally reaching out to touch the screen with gentle claws. When Minji showed Vera how to use a simple drawing program, the young alien created pictures of its family, stick figures that were clearly meant to be the 3 cubs and their lost parent. Keth, the youngest, had attached himself to Minji completely. The little one followed her everywhere, making soft, happy sounds whenever she picked him up. When Minji worked late into the night, Keth would curl up under her desk and sleep there. One evening, as Minji was reading research papers, Thais approached her with something in its claws. The oldest cub had been working on something all day, using scraps of metal and wire from around the lab. "What do you have there?" Minji asked gently. This placed the object in her hands. It was a crude but recognizable sculpture of a human figure. The proportions were not quite right, but the meaning was clear. Thais had made a statue of Minji. "Oh," Minji whispered, tears starting in her eyes. "It's beautiful." This made a complex series of sounds that Junho later translated as something like pack leader, protector, caregiver. In the cubs' language, there was apparently one word that meant all of those things together. The peaceful routine was interrupted when Captain Park arrived with news that changed everything. "We've made contact," he announced, "with their people." Minji felt her heart skip a beat. "What do you mean?" "A ship appeared at the edge of our system yesterday. They're calling themselves the Velkari. They say they're looking for a missing scout vessel." The cubs had gone very still. They were listening intently, understanding more human speech than anyone had realized. "Are they coming here?" Minji asked. "They'll arrive in a week," Park said. "Dr. Kim, I need to prepare you for the possibility that they'll want to take the cubs back." "No," Minji said immediately. "These are my children now." Park looked uncomfortable. "Legally, you have no claim to them. They're not human. But they choose to stay with me," Minji argued. "Look at them. They're happy here. They're learning and growing and feeling safe for the first time since their parent died." Thais suddenly stood up and walked over to Minji. The young alien leaned against her leg and made a sound that everyone now recognized as contentment. Then it looked directly at Captain Park and made a different sound, one they had never heard before. "What was that?" Park asked. Junho checked his translation notes. I think it was a word for mother." The room fell silent. Thais looked up at Minji with absolute trust and love in its golden eyes. It made the sound again, more clearly this time. "Mother," Junho confirmed. It's calling Dr. Kim its mother. Vera and Keth hurried over to join their sibling. Soon all 3 cubs were clustered around Minji, making the same sound over and over. Mother, mother, mother. Minji knelt down and gathered all 3 cubs into her arms. They snuggled against her, feeling safe and loved. In that moment, genetics did not matter. Species did not matter. What mattered was the bond they had built together. Captain, Minji said firmly, I don't care what their people say, I don't care what the law says, these cubs are my family now. Park looked at the scene before him, a human woman surrounded by alien children who clearly adored her. He had seen many things in his military career, but this was something new. Something that challenged everything he thought he knew about the universe. Dr. Kim, he said slowly, when the Velkari arrive, you'll need to be prepared to fight for them. I will, Minji replied without hesitation. Over the next few days, the cubs seemed to sense that change was coming. They stayed close to Minji, rarely leaving her side. Thais in particular became protective, watching the doors and windows as if expecting danger. Junho worked frantically to improve their translation system. If the cubs were going to have a voice in their own future, they needed to be able to communicate clearly with their birth species. I've made a breakthrough, he announced one morning. I can translate basic concepts both ways now. Human speech to Velkari sounds and vice versa. Can you ask them about their home? Minji wondered. About their people? Junho spoke to the cubs in their own language using the artificial translator. Their response was immediate and emotional. All 3 cubs pressed closer to Minji, making distressed sounds. What did they say? Minji asked. Junho looked troubled. They said home is where the fighting is. They said their people will want to make them into warriors, but they don't want to fight. They want to stay with the soft-scaled mother who sings to them and keeps them safe. Minji's heart ached. These children had lost their parent to violence. They had found peace and love with her. The thought of them being forced to return to a world of war was unbearable. When the Velkari ship arrives, she decided, I'm going to ask for the right to adopt them officially. Cross-species adoption. It's never been done before, but there's a first time for everything. Park nodded grimly. I'll support you however I can. But Dr. Kim, you need to understand. Their people might not see it the way we do. To them, you might just be an alien who stole their children. Then I'll have to convince them otherwise, Minji said. I'll show them how much love these cubs have received. I'll prove that family isn't about what species you are. It's about who cares for you and who you choose to love in return. The cubs seemed to understand the seriousness of the situation. That night, they all slept pressed against Minji, as if they could keep the approaching ship away through sheer force of will. Change was coming, whether they were ready or not. The Velkari ship appeared in the morning sky like a dark star. It was massive, 10 times larger than the scout vessel that had crashed months ago. Its black hull gleamed with weapon ports and strange technology that made human scanners scream. Warnings. Minji stood in her laboratory holding Keth while This and Vera pressed against her legs. The cubs had been agitated all morning, making nervous sounds and staying close to their human mother. They could sense that their old life was about to collide with their new one. The ship is requesting permission to land, Captain Park announced, over the communication system. Ambassador Zethris wishes to meet with colony leadership immediately. Minji looked down at the cubs. Whatever happens, she told them softly, I love you. I will always love you. These looked up at her with wise, golden eyes and made the sound for Mother Protector. The young alien understood more than any human realized. 2 hours later, the meeting took place in the colony's main conference room. Ambassador Zethris was even larger than Korath had been, standing nearly 12 feet tall with scales that shifted color like oil on water. Ancient scars marked his hide, speaking of many battles. When he spoke, his voice was like distant thunder. I am Zethris of the High Nest, he announced through a translation device. I come seeking the offspring of Scout Korath, who was lost in this system. Return them to me, and there will be peace between our peoples. Minji stepped forward, her heart pounding but her voice steady. I am Dr. Minji Kim. The cubs you speak of are under my protection. They are safe, healthy, and happy. Zethris's great head turned toward her. His eyes were silver, older and colder than the cub's golden ones. You are the human who holds our young? Bring them to me. I cannot do that, Minji replied. Not without their consent. The ambassador made a sound like grinding stone. Consent? They are hatchlings. They do not choose their fate. That is decided by the nest. Captain Park stepped forward diplomatically. Ambassador, perhaps we could arrange a meeting? Let you see how well the cubs have been cared for? Before Zethris could answer, alarms began blaring throughout the colony. Emergency lights flashed red. A voice crackled over the speakers. All personnel to emergency stations, this is not a drill. What's happening? Park demanded, grabbing his communicator. Commander Sang-Woo Han has taken control of the eastern sector, came the frantic reply. He's declaring martial law, says the colony is under alien influence and must be purified. Minji's blood ran cold. Commander Han led the colony's extremist faction, humans who believed any contact with aliens was dangerous. They had been vocal opponents of her work with the cubs. He's after the children, she realized. Park was already moving. Ambassador, I need to handle this situation. Please remain here where it's safe. But Zethris stood as well, his massive form filling the room. If the young are in danger, I will protect them. It is the way of the nest. They rushed toward Minji's laboratory. But Han's forces had moved faster. Armed soldiers surrounded the building, their weapons trained on the entrances. Through the windows, Minji could see the cubs huddled inside, terrified by the noise and confusion. Dr. Kim, Han's amplified voice echoed across the courtyard. You have 30 seconds to surrender the alien creatures, or we will take them by force. They're children, Minji shouted back. Innocent children. They're a contamination, Han replied coldly. Alien influence that weakens humanity. This ends now. Suddenly, the laboratory's back door opened. To everyone's amazement, this emerged alone. The oldest cub walked slowly toward the armed soldiers, its small hands raised to show it carried no weapons. What is it doing? Park whispered. Through Dr. Lim's translation device, they heard Thais speaking in its own language. The words were simple but brave. Do not hurt soft-scale mother. Hurt me instead. I am biggest. I am responsible. Ambassador Zethris made a sound like a rock slide. His silver eyes widened with something that might have been amazement. That hatchling just offered its life for yours, he told Minji. In our culture, such courage is shown only by the most honored warriors. Han's soldiers looked uncertain. They had expected monsters, not a small, frightened child trying to protect its family. But Han himself felt no such hesitation. Shoot it, he ordered. Sir? One soldier questioned. I said shoot the alien, Han repeated. That was when Vera and Keth appeared. The two younger cubs ran to their siblings' side, standing together in a protective formation. They were trembling, with fear, but they would not let this face danger alone. Minji could not stand it anymore. She broke away from the others and ran toward the cubs. No, she screamed. I won't let you hurt them. Energy weapons fired. But instead of hitting the cubs or Minji, the shots were absorbed by a shimmering barrier. Ambassador Zethris had activated some kind of protective shield, surrounding the human woman and the three young Velkari. Enough, the ambassador rumbled. His voice carried a power that made everyone stop and listen. I have seen what I came to see. He strode forward, his massive form casting shadows over Han's soldiers. You would shoot children, he said to the commander. Your own species' young could not be braver than these hatchlings, yet you call them monsters. Han raised his weapon, toward Zethris. One alien protecting another. This proves my point. And this proves mine, Zethris replied. The cubs had rushed to Minji's side. Instead of seeking protection from their own species' ambassador, they clung to their human mother. Their actions spoke louder than any words. Captain Park arrived with loyal security forces, finally ending the standoff. Han and his followers were arrested. As they were led away, Han shouted warnings about alien corruption and human weakness. In the aftermath, Minji sat with the cubs in her laboratory while the adults tried to figure out what came next. Thais, Vera, and Keth were quiet, processing what they had just experienced. They tried to protect me, Minji said to Ambassador Zethris. They're just babies, but they were willing to sacrifice themselves for me. Zethris studied the scene with his ancient silver eyes. In our culture, such loyalty is sacred. It cannot be commanded or forced. It can only be earned through love. Then you understand why I cannot let them go, Minji said. They chose me, as much as I chose them. The ambassador was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was thoughtful. You call them your children, but are you prepared to be judged as their parent by Velkari law? What does that mean? Minji asked. A formal trial, Zethris explained. Before the High Nest, you would need to prove that your claim to these young is valid according to our most ancient customs. Minji looked down at the cubs. They were listening intently, understanding more than they let on. If I agree to this trial, she asked, will they have a voice in deciding their own future? That is unusual, Zethris admitted. But these are unusual circumstances. Yes, the young may speak for themselves. This made a complex sound that Dr. Lim translated as, accept challenge for family. We accept, Minji said firmly. When and where? The trial will be held here, in neutral space, Zethris decided. In 7 days, judges from both our species will preside. Prepare your arguments well, human mother. The fate of more than just these 3 young may depend on the outcome. As the ambassador left to make arrangements, Minji hugged the cubs tightly. They had survived today's crisis, but a greater challenge lay ahead. She would need to prove to an alien court that love transcended species. That family was about choice rather than genetics. The cubs seemed to understand the stakes. That night, they slept peacefully for the first time in days, secure in their mother's arms and confident in her love. The trial was set to begin at dawn. A temporary court had been built in the colony's central plaza, with judges' seats arranged in a half-circle. Elder Kyung Shin represented humanity, a wise old woman who had helped write the colony's first laws. High Nest Mother Thaeka spoke for the Velkari, an ancient female whose scales had turned silver with age. Minji sat with the cubs in the front row, trying to stay calm. Thais, Vera, and Keth wore special translation devices that would let everyone understand their words. The young aliens seemed to grasp the importance of the day, sitting straighter and watching everything with serious eyes. Ambassador Zethris stood to address the court. We gather to decide the fate of 3 Velkari hatchlings. By our law, they belong to the nest that birthed them, but this human claims them as her own offspring. Such a thing has never been attempted before. High Nest Mother Thaeka spoke next, her voice like distant winds. The law is clear. Young belong with their own kind. They must learn the ways of the nest, the honor of the warrior, the strength of the clan. Elder Shin nodded respectfully. We understand Velkari tradition, but we must also consider what is best for these specific children. They have lived with Dr. Kim for months. They have formed bonds that cannot be ignored. Bonds? Thaeka made a dismissive sound. Hatchlings form bonds with any caregiver. That does not make that being their true parent. Minji felt her heart sink. The Velkari judge seemed determined to take the cubs away, but she had not come this far to give up without a fight. If I may speak, Minji said, standing up. The human may present her case, Thaeka allowed. Minji took a deep breath. Honored judges, I do not claim these cubs because I found them first, or because I fed them, or because no one else would take them. I claim them because we chose each other. She gestured to Thais, Vera, and Keth. When their parent died, these children were lost and afraid. They could have withdrawn into themselves. They could have refused all contact with humans. Instead, slowly and carefully, they decided to trust me. Trust is not kinship, Thaeka interrupted. Isn't it? Minji asked. What makes a parent? Is it the act of birth or the daily choice to love and protect? I have fed them when they were hungry, comforted them when they cried, taught them when they were curious. I have stayed awake all night when they were sick, celebrated when they learned something new, worried about their future every single day. Captain Park stood up. If I may add something, Your Honors. During the recent attack on our colony, these cubs showed remarkable courage. They risked their lives to protect Dr. Kim and to help rescue trapped civilians. Dr. Lim nodded agreement. Their actions during the crisis were not those of simple animals following instinct. They made conscious choices to help others, even at personal risk. This speaks to the quality of care and moral guidance they have received. Lieutenant Hyesu Choi also rose to testify. I lost my own children in an alien attack years ago. I know the difference between someone who is caring for children out of duty and someone who truly loves them. Dr. Kim loves these cubs as much as any mother could love any child. Tayeka listened to all the testimony, but her expression remained unmoved. Humans speak of love as if it were sufficient. But what of duty? What of honor? What of the obligations these young have to their own people? That was when Thais stood up. The oldest cub walked to the center of the court, its small form dwarfed by the massive judges. But there was nothing small about its presence or its voice. I speak for myself and my nest siblings, Thais said through the translator. The words came out formal and careful, as if the young alien had been practicing. We remember our birth parent. Korath was brave and strong and loved us greatly, but Korath is gone. The court was completely silent. The soft-scale mother found us when we were broken. This continued. She did not have to care for us. Her people feared us. Some wanted to hurt us, but she chose to protect us anyway. Vera stood and joined its sibling. She taught us that strength is not about fighting. It is about helping others who are weaker than you. Little Keth walked forward too, speaking in its high, clear voice. She sings to us when we have bad dreams. She makes us laugh when we are sad. She holds us when we are scared. All three cubs turned to face High Nest Mother Thieka directly. Honored Nest Mother, Thais said formally, we understand that we have duties to our people, but we also have duties to the one who saved us. The soft-scale mother needs us as much as we need her. You would choose her over your own kind? Thieka asked, her silver eyes unreadable. We choose family, Thais replied simply. She is our family now. Thieka was quiet for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was softer than before. These hatchlings speak with wisdom beyond their years, but wisdom can be dangerous. What happens when they are grown? When they must choose between human ways and Velkari ways? Ambassador Zethris stepped forward. Perhaps, honored mother, they will not have to choose. Perhaps they can be bridges between our peoples. Explain, Elder Shin requested. These young have learned things that no other Velkari know, Zethris said. They understand human emotions, human thinking, human kindness. At the same time, they carry Velkari strength, Velkari courage, Velkari honor. They are unique in all. The galaxy. Minji suddenly understood what the ambassador was suggesting. You're saying they could be ambassadors, representatives who truly understand both species. The very fact that this trial is happening proves there is much our peoples do not understand about each other, Zethris continued. Who better to teach us than young who have been raised by both human love and Velkari tradition? High Nest Mother. Thieka studied the cubs for a long moment. Is this what you want, young ones? To stand between two worlds? To belong fully to neither? Thys exchanged glances with Vera and Keth. Then the oldest cub spoke with quiet conviction. We want to belong to love, honored mother. Love has no species. The words hung in the air like a challenge to everything both races had believed about family and kinship. Elder Shin leaned forward. High Nest Mother, what say you? Can these children be allowed to choose their own path? Thieka closed her silver eyes and remained silent for several minutes. The entire court waited, barely breathing. Finally, the ancient Velkari judge opened her eyes and spoke. In the oldest days of our people, before wars and hatred divided the galaxy, there was a saying, the heart chooses its own nest. I had thought that wisdom was lost forever. She looked at Minji with something that might have been respect. Human, mother, you have done something I thought impossible. You have raised Velkari young who are strong without being cruel, brave without being reckless, loyal without being blind. Minji held her breath. The court finds that these hatchlings may choose their guardian, Theka announced. Let it be recorded that they choose freely without coercion, to remain with the human who has shown them that love transcends all boundaries. The plaza erupted in cheers. Minji fell to her knees as the cubs rushed into her arms, all of them, crying with relief and joy. They had won not just the trial but the right to stay together as a family. But more than that, they had proven that the universe was bigger and more beautiful than anyone had imagined. 5 years had passed since the trial that changed everything. The research station had grown into something magnificent, a joint human-Velkari facility where scientists from both species worked side by side. The building was designed to accommodate both human and Velkari needs, with high ceilings for the tall aliens and comfortable spaces for human researchers. Minji stood in the graduation hall, watching her 3 children receive their certificates from the first Interspecies Academy. Thais, now nearly as tall as a human adult, walked across the stage with dignity and grace. Vera followed, practically bouncing with excitement. Little Keth, no longer quite so little, beamed with pride as Elder Shin handed over the graduation scroll. I'm so proud of them, Lieutenant Hisu Choi whispered. She had become like an aunt to the cubs over the years, helping Minji raise them and teaching them about human military honor. Captain Park, now promoted to colonel, nodded agreement. They've exceeded every expectation. Their teachers say they're the most promising students the Academy has ever had. The cubs had grown into remarkable young beings. Thais had developed into a natural diplomat, able to mediate disputes between humans and Velkari with wisdom that impressed even the adults. The eldest had also discovered a talent for engineering, designing new technologies that combined the best of both species' innovations. Vera had become fascinated with art and culture, creating beautiful works that blended human creativity with Velkari symbolism. The galleries of the research station were filled with Vera's paintings and sculptures, each one telling stories of 2 peoples learning to understand each other. Keth had followed a path that surprised everyone. The youngest had become passionate about medicine, driven by a desire to heal rather than harm. Keth's gentle nature and natural empathy made the young Velkari incredibly gifted at treating patients from both species. After the ceremony, the family gathered in their home, the expanded laboratory that had become a warm, comfortable house over the years. Ambassador Zethris had come for the graduation, bringing gifts from the Velkari homeworld. The Highness sends their congratulations, Zethris announced formally. These young ones have brought great honor to both their peoples. But then his manner became less formal, more personal. Over the years, the stern ambassador had become almost like a grandfather to the cubs. I have news, he said with barely contained excitement. The Velkari Council has approved the construction of a new embassy here, and they want Thais to serve as the first junior ambassador. This made the harmonic sound that meant pleased surprise. They want me to represent our people? Both peoples, Zethris corrected. You understand humans in ways that other Velkari never could, and you understand Velkari honor in ways that humans are still learning. Minji felt a familiar mix of pride and worry. Her children were growing up, taking on responsibilities that would shape the future of 2 species. Part of her wanted to keep them safe at home forever, but she knew they were meant for greater things. What about Vera and Keth? She asked. What opportunities await them? Dr. Lim, who had become the director of cultural studies at the facility, smiled broadly. The University of New Earth has offered Vera a full scholarship to study interspecies art therapy, and the Velkari Medical Collective wants Keth to train at their most prestigious healing center. Vera and Keth exchanged excited glances. These were opportunities they had dreamed about. But, Minji said carefully, these positions would mean leaving home. The cubs, young adults now really, gathered around their human mother. This spoke for all of them. Soft-scale mother, you taught us that love is not about holding on. It is about letting go when the time is right. You taught us to be bridges between worlds, Vera added. Now we need to go build those bridges. Keth, ever the gentle one, nuzzled against Minji's shoulder. We will always come home. Family is not about distance. It is about connection. Minji felt tears in her eyes, but they were tears of pride, not sadness. Her children had grown into exactly the kind of beings she had hoped they would become. Strong, compassionate, wise, and ready to make the galaxy a better place. 6 months later, Minji received a message that would change her life once again. It came from deep space, transmitted through the new communication networks that connected dozens of species across the galaxy. Dr. Kim, the message began, we are the Serenity Coalition representing 7 different species. We have heard of your work with Velkari orphans. We have children of our own who need help, refugees from war, survivors of natural disasters, young ones who have lost their families to violence and hatred. The message continued, showing images of alien children from species Minji had never seen before. Some looked like living crystals, others like beings made of flowing energy. All of them looked lost and frightened and alone. Would you consider expanding your work? We can provide resources, funding, support staff. What we cannot provide is what you have already proven you possess, the ability to love across all boundaries. Minji read the message 3 times before she fully understood what they were asking. They wanted her to create an orphanage for the galaxy's most vulnerable children, regardless of species. That evening, she called her children to discuss the opportunity. They appeared on her communication screen from their various locations, Thais from the embassy, Vera from art school, Keth from medical training. What do you think? She asked after explaining the proposal. I think, Thais said solemnly, that other children deserve the same chance we had. I think, Vera added with excitement, that you could teach the whole galaxy what family really means. I think, Keth said softly, that this is what you were meant to do all along. 3 months later, the new Jeju Interspecies Children's Center opened its doors. The facility was larger than anything Minji had imagined, with specialized environments for dozens of different species needs. But at its heart, it operated on the same simple principle that had guided her work with Thais, Vera, and Keth. Love transcends all boundaries. The first group of children included crystal beings from the Andromeda sector, energy creatures from the galactic core, and even some human orphans from distant colonies. They were all afraid, all alone, all in need of someone to show them that they mattered. Minji stood in the main playroom watching children from 12 different species, learning to play together. A crystal child was teaching human children how to sing in harmonic frequencies. An energy being was helping a young Velkari build a tower of blocks using pure thought. Laughter, in a dozen different forms, filled the air. Captain Park, now administrator of New Jeju Colony, joined her at the observation window. Any regrets? He asked. Minji shook her head. How can I regret something that has brought so much joy? Even when some people still say you're too soft, too idealistic? Especially then, Minji replied with a smile. The galaxy has enough warriors, enough hard people making hard choices. What it needs is more softness, more kindness, more people willing to love what others fear. She watched as Thais arrived for a visit, immediately surrounded by excited children who had heard stories about the first interspecies family. Her eldest child knelt down to their level, speaking gently to each one, making them feel special and valued. Besides, Minji continued, I've learned something important over these years. Love isn't a weakness that makes you vulnerable. Love is a strength that makes you unstoppable. As if to prove her point, a new ship appeared in the sky. Another group of orphaned children seeking sanctuary. Minji felt her heart expand to make room for them all, just as it had expanded to make room for 3 scared Velkari cubs years ago. The beast had fallen in battle, but from that tragedy had grown something beautiful. A new understanding of what family could be. And now that understanding was spreading across the stars, one child at a time. In the end, perhaps that was the real victory. Not the winning of battles or the claiming of territory, but the simple act of opening one's heart wide enough to hold the whole galaxy. The future was bright with possibility, and it belonged to all the children who had learned that love recognizes no boundaries.